Lord a couple times. I think that's about it.
Yep.
No. Thomas, when Thomas sees Jesus after the resurrection, he tells him, "My Lord and my God." So that's a place where I'd say most scholars would agree that Jesus is being identified with the word God.
Well,
And
that,
The,
and I
the,
think you have to kind of know the Bible because it gets very difficult if you're like, oh, well, Jesus never declared to be God, but Jesus declared to be Yahweh multiple times. But you would kind of have to know the scripture. So to know the prophecies that he's referencing, to know what he's talking about. So,
that's right. so give me an
it,
example.
Well,
Give me an
yeah, I think
example, Wisdom.
okay. I was just gonna say, I think wisdom's right here, but I think you can say it in a clearer way, which is that Jesus alludes to be God throughout all the Gospels, but I don't think Jesus ever makes a direct claim to be God. The closest you can get to that claim is "I and the Father are one,"
Right.
and that is the closest claim that you can get. And maybe in Mark's Gospel, the Son of Man claim that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, which is only an act God can do. I think
Yeah,
those are your probably two closest things from Jesus's own mouth. You can find many places in all the Gospels that the others are claiming that he is God or believe that he is God, but I think Jesus himself does not make that direct claim explicitly. And wisdom is correct. Most of the things Jesus says is referring to prophetic scripture. Most of them. Not all, but most of them. And a lot of those times he is alluding to, once again, being God, not directly saying it, but absolutely alluding to it.
Right. So I would argue that a lot of that, that a lot of those messianic prophecies were either not prophecies, were already fulfilled, or weren't fulfilled by Jesus exclusively.
no, they weren't fulfilled. And some of them, right? I've even talked to Jewish people today about this, and I'm like, so what do you think? Do you think that Isaiah just didn't get it right here? Or what's going on with this? And a lot of these prophecies, yeah, they either say that they're still going to come. Some of them are still hopefully waiting on the Messiah, and then other ones just are saying, yeah, like these just did not get fulfilled. So no, 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 no. And then Jesus Christ explicitly, somebody asked me like, what? So for
What
example,
is
Jesus,
okay?
go on.
My concern is that I see a lot of. Okay, so I'm going to ask some questions here, and please know that I am not trying to be derogatory in any way. Okay, have you, when you look at the Bible, when you're reading the Bible, do you look at any like historical or critical text around the Bible, or are you getting what you know from the Bible just from the Bible itself and from your teachers?
yeah.
Yeah, I look at historical text around the Bible.
Okay, because Elijah has telling a very specific story
What?
about a
Elijah's
particular
telling a very
time in Jewish
specific.
history, right? So
What are you talking
Elijah
about?
is a
I
self-contained.
didn't mention Elijah. What are you talking about?
You did earlier, or maybe you said Isaiah. I'm sorry. In either way, in
It was
either
Isaiah.
case, Isaiah. Isaiah is telling a very specific story. It's not telling a story for the future. It's telling a story for the time that it's in. And we
Yeah,
read into that. We
What in
read into
particular?
that.
What in what in
We,
particular are you talking about? Because
um, I,
Isaiah has 66 chapters. So
yeah,
I
I
would
think the
have to
one that
know.
typically gets brought up is Isaiah 53.
Okay, but I wasn't talking about. See, this is going to be a harmful conversation
Well, no,
if
I'm
you're
saying I was
debating things I'm
asking you
not
to
even.
give me an example of a prophecy that
Oh,
had
I
been
was, and
fulfilled.
then you cut me off, and then you started debating something I'm not even discussing. So that's why I was confused. So yeah, no, I first of all, I never said anything about Elijah at all. But it's ironic. That's the Holy Spirit speaking. And you know why? Because I didn't mention Elijah, but I was gonna go there. That's hilarious. Because what when you
Is
asked
this
me
next
for
on
a
the list?
huh?
Sorry, I made a comment under my breath. No problem.
Oh yeah, no worries. Okay, so look, so when you asked me for a specific example, I was going to tell you that Jesus Christ himself said John is Elijah. I was going to tell you that. And it's funny because I never even got to say it because you cut me off. But you mentioned Elijah's name anyway. So when Jesus said John is Elijah, now this does connect back to Isaiah, but it's not Isaiah 50, it's Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 3. And also Malachi also prophesied basically the same thing. And it's a little bit more specific in Malachi because there Yahweh says that on the day that prophet that would announce his visitation would be named Elijah. He said, "I'm going to send you Elijah before." on this day, before the day, anyway. And so when John the Baptist comes, not only does John the Baptist say, I am the prophet that's walking around in the wilderness, etc., but then Jesus says John is Elijah, and then Jesus also clarifies and says they've been waiting for the Elijah's day and they saw it and didn't even realize it. So, okay, go on.
I wonder if it might be more productive if we just try and identify what people agree on
Yeah,
about
well, he
Jesus.
asked me for a prophecy, for example. So I was giving him an example of a prophecy where Jesus
What is
specifically
what is
claimed
it?
deity.
Right. What does everybody agree on about Jesus?
He's the Son of God. I would say wisdom would agree with that.
It sounds like not everybody agrees with that part.
But the
Yeah, because
Jesus,
we
the
have
Son of God.
atheists up here. So,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
one of us are atheists.
I'm more than happy to drop out if you guys want to have a believers conversation. But no, I don't believe
Oh,
any of it. I think
well,
it's
no, I
all
was wanting you
yeah.
to respond to because you asked me for a prophecy and then I gave you one and then you didn't respond
Yeah,
to it at
it's
all.
not prophecy. That's not a
I,
prophecy.
Isaiah 40 is not a prophecy and
It's not a
Malachi is not a
prophecy about
prophecy.
Jesus. No, it's not a
About any of
prophecy about
Isaiah
Jesus.
being prophetic about Jesus.
Wait, hold on, stop. So are we going to respond to how what Jesus said to it, or we're just going to go, oh no, no,
We're going
no,
to
it's not a
say that
prophecy?
Elijah was not a prophecy about Jesus. That is a post hoc reading.
Jesus said he is
Isaiah was
Elijah
about
to
the Jews.
come. So then hold on, stop. So it because what you first asked me for was a connection where
No,
Jesus
that's not
said,
what I asked you for. I asked you for a prophecy that had been fulfilled. What you are doing is taking a prophecy and saying Jesus said the prophecy came true, therefore it came true. That's
okay,
like,
not
you
a
know what?
prophecy that came true.
can I
I don't want
speak
to
on
engage with you
Isaiah?
anymore because you're actually just intellectually dishonest. You're
I'm
refusing
not being
to
intellectually
even
dishonest.
engage with what I just presented to you.
I am
You're just
asking you
like,
for, I want a prophetic text that actually shows that it came true
okay, Daniel
specifically.
7, Daniel 2, Daniel 7.
Oh, for fuck's sake. All right, I'm not going to argue this anymore. I'm going to drop
What
out
on
because
earth? So
I have
Daniel
gone
Wait,
2,
wisdom,
anti-theist,
wisdom. I'm
anti-theist, can
57
I help
years
for two
old.
seconds before you
Yeah,
drop?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Listen, I wanted to help out in the conversation. I think that wisdom is probably correct in what she's saying, but going about it wrong. I think that Isaiah does refer to Jesus, but I think it in a different way than you would think of his prophecy. So, to me, I think it's obvious that Jesus comes to understand the prophetic stuff that used to be that people consider to be about Israel to be about him. I
And
think that
reframes
is
it.
the
And reframes
Jesus's.
it to make it about him. Yes.
Yeah,
okay,
but
so
listen, one
Daniel
of the
2
things
and
that
Daniel
as a
7 would
textual
be prophecies that
as a
came
text
true.
wisdom, can I have the floor to say?
Okay, fine,
I
but
promise.
okay,
I'm a believer
fine.
just like you are.
I
Yeah, and
understand, but
so
he's not
Isaiah, when
engaging, so I understand.
I'm just trying to help I'm gonna let you take over. I'm just gonna try to help the conversation with some facts and help out. I study textual criticism, and so when I actually look at the book of Isaiah, I don't think Isaiah wrote Isaiah 53, Isaiah 42. I think that Isaiah stops writing at around chapter 32, 33. I think the oldest manuscripts of Isaiah that we have access to show an etymology and a scriptural difference in the way it's written around that time. And when you look at that, I think that it's Isaiah's counterpart, his disciple, if you will, that probably finishes that work. And most of the prophecies that are esoteric about Israel or Jesus probably come from Isaiah's second source. And so when I look at that, I look at possible visions, I look at possible revelation given, and as I fast forward to Jesus' time, I think he looks at the prophetic text of Isaiah and he says, "Look, I know I'm the son of God. I am God. You know, I was emptied out and dwelled on man with man now. And I think that when he is growing up, because Jesus does have a human life, he comes to understand Isaiah is speaking about him and not about Israel. I think it's a realization of prophecy through Jesus, not that he reinterprets it and hijacks it. That's how I see the text. That's how I see it also through textual criticism. I'm happy to let you guys just go off on your debate here, but I wanted to bring some fact from the scholar world to it.
No, I'm really glad that you brought up Second Isaiah because that's a really important point. It's an add-on to the text, and this is one of my challenges with almost all of the Bible. It is completely anonymous. We don't know who wrote it. It is compiled from other sources. We know for a fact that the authors of the New Testament would have had
Okay,
access
so
to
now
the
we're
Old
shifting. I just want
Testament.
to make sure we know that now we're shifting because the first thing that was brought up with what prophecies,
Right. And
right,
I
did
disagree with
Jesus.
you on the fact that that is a prophecy. So we
Okay,
can move on.
okay, so let's move on to Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And
Daniel
then
2
if
is
you
also not about
okay, so
Jesus.
then what's a prophecy? So wait, so can I
Did
prove
God
to you it's
tell
about
you in did
Jesus?
God tell you in the Old Testament how to know a good prophet from a bad prophet?
Okay, so basically, if you're just going to
Did
say that
did
every
God tell
prophecy is
you?
not a prophecy,
Did
then you're just not
God
even worth
told
talking to.
us?
I'm going to mute. You're not about to rage bait me. You're not.
All right. Well, again, I don't like being talked over either. So I'm happy to
I do
drop
think it's a
out.
matter of opinion. I
Well,
do think it's a matter of
also
opinion.
the
You
Bible
can
isn't
you can
completely
totally read
anonymous.
those
It's
as
not
not
about
prophecies,
Paul.
or you can read prophetic. I mean, it just depends on your belief standpoint. You're coming into it in a term of unbelief, which is totally understandable. I mean, I lived 12 years as an anti-theist, just like you, man. Christopher Hitchens, that was my guy. You know what I mean? I was a big anti-theist, and what I was convinced by personal revelation. Therefore, I can read these things as prophetic, as opposed to reading them as something that doesn't come true. But I think it's your frame of mind as you enter. I don't think you're inherently right or wrong by believing that these things are prophetic or not, just depending on how you interpret the text.
The whole
Yeah,
point that
and
anti-theist
I
was
get that,
making
Garrett, but
is
my
that
concern is, well, go
these
ahead, Matthew. I'm
viewpoints
sorry.
are, yeah, no worries, man. The whole like point anti-theist was making is that these things were viewed as like post hoc. They're viewed post hoc. They're after the fact, and now you're interpreting them through a new lens. Whereas at the time, this is not how they were presented or put forward. So this change in interpretation like tears you away
Well,
from
no,
being
they
able to
were
use it as
always
prof.
messianic.
I didn't know if I was done speaking yet. Wisdom.
Yeah,
I'm
but you
really
guys are just
sorry.
so far off track.
I just started speaking. I've been muted the whole damn time. So if we're looking at these things post hoc and we're using them as prophecy that was not intended by the writers and was not viewed that way at the time of the writing, why would we accept that? Even if somebody later on that you believe to be divine says so, right?
Well,
I
okay, can I
don't have any
respond?
justification for that because that's just
So the
circular.
Matt,
it's not
I
circular
agree with
Oh,
you.
reasoning.
wow. Okay. I would really love to be able to finish what I'm saying. Yes, I would love to hear you respond as soon as I'm done. So if you're holding to Jesus viewing these as prophecies about him after the fact, and you're holding to any sort of ideas about Jesus due to prophecies made about Jesus, then this is going to be circular.
Okay, thank you. So again, you all's argument is way off track. So what he asked me for were prophecies that were about Christ and that Christ that were about him that came true. He asked me that. Coco can play it back. I've given you guys now two. What's unfortunate is you guys aren't even debating the actual prophecies. You're just telling me they're not prophecies. Because if I went to the actual Bible verses and read them, not only do Jewish scholars say that these are messianic prophecies, they all say that these are about the Messiah. Now, where they're going to differ with me is that they say, no, Jesus is not the Messiah. Therefore, these are not about Jesus. But if Jesus were the Messiah, then yes, these messianic prophecies would be about him. So what you guys are doing is saying, oh, it's ad hoc and they're just bringing it in afterwards. First of all, fulfillment of prophecy always follows the actual prophecy.
That's right.
So any
That's right.
fulfillment of the prophecy is always going to come after the prophecy. That's number one. And then number two, these specific prophecies that I'm saying that Christ fulfilled are actual messianic prophecies. That means that they are not just text that the author is saying. For example, like I could almost even grant you Isaiah 9:6, even though I don't. But even a verse like Isaiah 9:6, where sometimes Jewish people are saying this is not going to be a future prophecy, this was about an immediate birth or something of that nature. No, I'm bringing you prophecies that were about the future to be fulfilled by Messiah. And that Jesus Christ said he fulfilled these prophecies. And this is the problem. This is what you are not directly engaging with. You're just going, oh, well, the Bible itself is corrupt. Oh, well, you know what? This might not be
Nobody said
no,
that.
you're not. He did say it. The other one did say it. He started mentioning how, oh, Isaiah really didn't even write this, and we don't know. The authors are anonymous. He started going in the
I
fields.
said that
And
too,
that's
but
what
I'm
I
a
keep
believer.
telling
That
you.
was coming
Like,
from
you
I'm a
guys are
scholar
Garrett.
of
not
the Bible.
coming
Yeah, I'm
back
a
to
scholar of the
address
Bible, and all textual criticism
you
points
guys
to
are
the
not
fact that
coming
these were
back to
written.
address what I'm specifically saying, which is these
Okay.
specific Bible verses are messianic, and
All right.
Christ says that he fulfilled them.
You
Okay,
don't
so
think we're counting the hits
you
and
didn't
ignoring the misses here?
actually talk about anything that I said. What I said was that Isaiah is not prophecy of the Messiah. Isaiah is talking about the Israelites. It's talking about the nation of Israel. It's not talking about the Messiah. And there's a lot of people who interpret Isaiah as talking about the Messiah now.
Isaiah
And
40?
that's I'm still speaking. I waited till you were
You're so
done.
wrong. Okay. All
Please
right.
understand I waited till you were done. I think you are extremely wrong right now, but I waited until you were done.
Okay, fine.
So Isaiah is not about the Messiah. Isaiah is about the nation of Israel. And the current interpretation is post hoc about the current way believers interpret Isaiah and is not actually going to be discussing the text as it was interpreted before. This is a change of interpretation. And if you're going to hold to a change of interpretation on these and then call it prophecies of the Messiah and then attach it to Jesus, and then say the reason you're doing so is because Jesus accepts them as prophecy about him, then you're just running this circular gambit of saying Jesus is the Messiah being discussed and the Messiah is saying that he's the one being discussed. It doesn't actually solve the problem.
Which verses wisdom are you talking
Yeah,
about?
and that thank you, Pierre. Okay,
Yeah.
so the verse I'm not talking. He keeps talking about Isaiah, presumably 53. That's not even what I'm talking about. So the verses that I'm
I
talking
didn't
about are
say
specifically
53.
Malachi. Okay, are specifically Malachi 4. I think it is in the KJV. Then there's going to be Isaiah 43. There's Daniel. Tried to bring up Daniel 2, the messianic prophecy of Daniel. And then also the prophecy in Leviticus where Yahweh is going to walk upon earth. That's
I
Leviticus
only
26
discussed
11.
Isaiah.
So, right, but you haven't discussed the specific prophecy in Isaiah. You don't even know what verse. PRK is the first one that said which prophecies,
It
right?
doesn't matter which
It
verse in
does
Isaiah,
matter.
because
It does
no,
matter which verse in Isaiah.
my statement, wisdom, is that the entirety of Isaiah is about the Israelite people, and none of it is prophecy about Jesus.
Matthew,
And
can
to
I ask you a
hold
Okay.
it
quick
as
question?
prophecy about Jesus would be post hoc, a
Yep, Matt,
different interpretation.
can I ask you a quick question, Matthew?
Sure.
Do you believe that those are prophecies in general just about Israel, or you don't believe that Isaiah is prophetic in any way?
It's a mix of both. I think there's a lot of Isaiah that is interpreted as prophecy that is not prophecy, and I believe there are some points in Isaiah that are prophetic about Israel.
Okay, just when trying to get clarification. I'll let y'all continue.
Well, I would point out that God tells us in the Old Testament how we know a prophet is true, and that is that their prophecies come true. So, in order to come true, they kind of need to do it in their lifetime. That's what God was saying. If it
I don't
comes
think
true
that
in your
holds up with
lifetime, then you're
Scripture.
a good prophet.
I don't think
It
that holds up
doesn't,
in Scripture.
yeah, I
I
don't think
think
so.
that,
Not in their
Okay.
yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah, there's a specific verse. I'd be happy to find it for you. But at any rate, the testimonies, all the things in the Old Testament were written for the Old Testament. So my concern about a lot of Christianity is that it wants to claim the Old Testament wherever it makes sense to prop up Christianity, but they want to ignore the rest of it where it makes God look bad,
I don't
Oh
agree
and
with
no, I
that
don't ignore
position.
that's
anything.
not fair to the religion.
Okay,
I
let
don't
me
agree with
just
that
read one more
position.
thing and I'll be done. So I'm just going to read for Rashi, and we obviously know that he's a scholar. So for Malachi 3:1, he does acknowledge that this is about the time of divine visitation, redemption, or a messianic prophecy. And then there's two other scholars here that are Jewish that also say that this is about the Messiah, specifically Malachi 1. And what's great about this is the verse that I was bringing up when I said that Jesus says that John the Baptist is Elijah. So again, unfortunately, you guys keep trying to derail the conversation as opposed to just a general conversation on the Bible and whether or not you trust it, and I can and Christianity and how we're interloping and all these things. But when the actual Jewish scholars say Daniel is messianic, Leviticus is messianic, Isaiah parts of that are messianic. Yes,
Jewish
Malachi. Can I
messianic
please stop? Hold
wisdom.
on.
See,
Malachi
and
is
what I
messianic.
said
Hold
is
on.
that Isaiah is
Malachi is
not.
messianic. Okay, let me just cross out Isaiah because I don't have that one pulled up. But Malachi was the one that I literally first brought to you, where Jesus Christ, out of his mouth, connected himself to this prophecy as being Yahweh. So, therefore, let's just stick here. And the actual Jewish scholars absolutely say that this is a messianic prophecy. He also said that he was the son of man from Daniel. Jewish scholars say that that is a messianic prophecy. So therefore, it's really ridiculous when you guys say that these things were not messianic prophecies,
That's
as
not
in the
what I
Jews are
said.
That
still waiting
that's
for a
not what was
Messiah.
said,
Not at
wisdom.
all.
That's
What
not
was
what was
said.
So
said,
they are
wisdom.
messianic
That is
prophecies.
not what I
Okay, hold
said.
on, stop. So then they are messianic prophecies.
No,
Oh my
they are
lord.
messianic prophecies for the
Some are.
Messiah they were waiting for at the time.
They're still
None
waiting
of
on
the
the
Jewish,
Messiah.
if the Jews believed that Jesus was fulfilling all of their prophecies and was their Messiah, then why did they have him killed?
I didn't say they. Oh my word! No, this initial conversation was there are messianic prophecies that
They
Christ
were
fulfilled.
messianic for a
Then you
Messiah
said
that
they are
had
not
not.
messianic. You said that they weren't
I did
prophecies.
not say they were
Okay, you
messianic.
know
No,
what?
we're
Now
not
you're just
messianic. I
I think
said
y'all
they
are just
disingenuous.
yelling at
Okay,
each other at this
I'm
point.
done
Yeah, he's
yelling.
just
I'm done yelling.
disingenuous at this point.
I'm
I'm
not
done.
yelling.
Yeah, how do we
No,
move
you're
on?
hearing what you want to hear and
Yeah,
not
Garrett,
asking
you
me
can
what I
talk to
said.
him.
Okay? If you want to know what I said, ask what I
I don't
said.
want
Don't
to.
tell
No,
me
I
what I
don't want to know
said.
what you said. I really
I'm
don't.
on
I could care
Wisdom's
less what
side
you
here.
said.
I think Wisdom did a pretty good job there. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
Yeah, thank you, PRK. I'm done
yeah.
with that. The Lord said, dust your feet. PRK, if you ever do want to have a debate, though, about this formally, I would love to do that again. I
We
know we did
Wisdom
it
could,
set it
but you're
before,
up.
not
but
gonna
Wait,
like
on
my
my live
approach, Wisdom. You
exclusive?
do understand that
yeah, on your live exclusive. What'd you say,
I'm
PRK?
I'm a fallibilist, Wisdom. So if we do have that type of debate, you'd have to like there shouldn't be so many things that like I don't even know if it's gonna be fair
Wait, you're a
because I'm
what? What did you just say? You're
a
a what?
fallibilist.
He thinks the
Oh,
Bible
so,
is has errors.
hmm. Okay, wait. Ooh. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
so I
let's
don't
try
know
to
if you
talk
want me
about
to
it.
do
And
I also agree with that as well. I tend to think the Bible is not inerrant and does have errors, but I'm also a Christ follower.
okay, well, right, okay, but all right. So, what about the Book of John? What do you think about that?
Me
well,
specifically, or
yeah, I
PRK?
mean, I'm gonna agree that the Book of John, like, more than likely identifies Jesus as God, maybe like John 1:1 and John 20:20. Like, I'm gonna probably have some problems with John though. Yeah, just in
It would it
general,
just be interpretation? Like, would you? Okay, so wait, would you
not just
take John?
interpretation,
What are you
just
asking
like
specifically about John? Because I'd like to wade
yeah,
into.
I would want to be more specific. Like, I
Well,
yeah.
I think that John. Okay, so for example, if we debated, I could just be candid and say John. If I use John as my proof text that Jesus is God and thus Trinity has to follow through, right?
Mhm.
Would you accept that, or would you ultimately be like, no, well, I don't take John as authoritative anyway, so no
Yeah,
worries.
exactly. I wouldn't accept
Jesus is
that
the only
just because it
authority that I
says it
hold
in
to.
John. Like
Okay.
that's why I was trying to debate whether Paul believed it, which I know you have some verses that you brought up. I did look into that First
Colossians,
Corinthians 10:9.
yeah.
I think it's
Corinthians
First
10:9. Yeah,
Yeah.
Corinthians. Hmm.
I think there's a I still have to study it a little bit more, but there's a textual variant there. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I mean, there's textual variants all over, right? Even with John 1:18, but what is the original, like the earliest originalist manuscript say? Most original.
Yeah, but you can't just go by what the earliest. You also have to look at what, so for example, like in John, I think 1:18, it says the only begotten God, and other manuscripts say the only begotten Son. The earliest manuscripts are going to say the only begotten God, but the most, thousands more, like way more manuscripts are going to say only begotten Son. So that it's you look at both the abundance and the earliness of the manuscripts to decipher what the actual original manuscript was saying. So it's not as easy as to say the oldest says it, therefore this is what was originally said. It's not that easy.
I do agree with that's not that easy, but I will say, as somebody who does textual criticism and as a lot of the facsimiles that I actually use in my actual everyday study, I think that the intellectual pursuit at getting down as close to what the original authors are saying and then interpreting the meaning from that base text is probably the best way to go about your
Yeah, I
interpretation of
agree, but I
scripture.
think
Yeah,
it's
that's
tricky.
an
Like, you would
important
Amen.
agree
thing to
with me,
do,
right, Garrett,
definitely.
that there's like, if I, let's say I have 5,000 manuscripts that say only begotten Son, and I have, you know, five manuscripts that say only begotten God, but the five manuscripts are earlier than the 5,000 manuscripts that say only begotten Son.
But none of them are from the
From your
time of the
perspective,
actual
what do you think
writing.
the original manuscript said?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to say data over dogma, right? And so I try to go with what the data says. And if the data is overwhelming in a certain translation, and there is only an offshoot of one manuscript that may be 20 years older, let's just use 20 to 30 years older, but it
Right.
has a different phrasing, I think I would go with the data, overwhelming data over the dogma of that one scripture.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's what good textual critics will do, though. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with studying that one outlier and understanding maybe why it was interpreted this way or transcribed a certain way. Doesn't mean you have to hold it authoritative over the data.
Yeah. I
So
would.
Garrett, which one do you? Okay, so John
You have to
1:18.
stress
What
out the
version do
sandwich,
you
okay?
say
Is that a
is
kid
the
on my
most
live
reliable?
stream? No kidding.
You have the rest of
Yeah,
it.
so for me, as far as a translation that I think is probably the most reliable, I tend to use the NASB 2020 at the moment. It's very rigid, but it's as close to the Greek of the critical and the majority text as possible. I think that to me is good. Someone in the comment says that NRSVUE is, by the way, a phenomenal translations. I tend to use the HarperCollins translation of that from a scholar point of view.
Oh,
So,
Wait, did you say V like version or B like boy?
so NRSV, it's the New Revised Standard Version Updated
Oh yeah,
Edition.
that's the one. Okay, yeah, that's the Catholic version.
Yeah, it's a
No,
really good translation. Yeah.
There's also a Catholic version.
there is a Catholic version, but that's not inherently a Catholic translation. The
right.
only inherent Catholic translation sanctioned in English is the New American Bible.
Okay, so I just looked up your version. Then the NRSV, it says, "No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, Himself, God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made Him known." So yeah, that's kind of like I read the CSB, the Christian Standard Bible,
I like the
and
CSB.
yeah, that and this one is close to the one that I read. So
Yeah, so
yeah,
Interesting.
I think the best text to study from right now is probably the NASB 2020. I think the best scholarly consensus text is what you just read, the NRSV
mhm.
UE. And I think that for modern everyday readers that don't have to get into something that's so rigid, I like to point them to something that's maybe a little bit more conservative, maybe like the ESV, or something that's a little bit more palatable for our current dialect. But that's I wouldn't study from that. I would study for a much more rigid text.
But just real quick, back on the question being asked about John, I would like to toss in the problem with John being non-synoptic and the dating and the questions of authorship with John. I wouldn't
Yeah, that's
hold it
what I
as
would probably press on
authoritative
too.
even on those points alone, right? Just not being synoptic is going to be an issue, and being the oldest of the texts with an anonymous authorship is just problematic.
Yeah,
It's
Matthew,
still
I agree
pretty
with you.
early, isn't
It's
it,
a
Garrett?
year 90,
That's
year
like
90, 80 to 90 is when you think that John is written. And I do
John
take the
90 to
position.
110, actually, around there.
That's
Oh,
That's
the
early.
consensus, but
I
there is a
do.
Yeah,
shifting
that's early
consensus.
according to some people.
Like a lot of scholars nowadays are dating Luke and Acts to the second century. And if I had
Yeah,
my, so you know,
I
we're
don't
looking
push
at
that
a
hard.
lot of scholars. So if Luke is coming like 120 AD, then when is John? Like,
Yeah, you're
but
looking at
yeah,
like
the
120 to
consensus is
150.
90 AD.
Yeah,
But
listen,
Yeah.
I'm willing to take a faith position here and not, and just be completely frank. I do tend to date the Gospels inherently about 5 to 10 years earlier than a lot of scholars do, just based on what I would consider good textual evidence for the transmission of the story.
sure.
But that's just me. I'm not saying I'm authoritative on that. When I look at John, though, I don't think there's any good evidence that John finished or wrote his gospel. I think that it was probably finished by an anonymous author. But I do hold that I think John did write John 1:1. I think
the
that we can.
prologue. Yeah.
Okay. And I wouldn't be too like opposed to that, saying that like he wrote
Phone call. I
John 1 1 and it was
apologize.
passed down well. I wouldn't be opposed to
Yes.
that. but
Yeah, there's
I
a
think
really
I give it
good scholarly
a pretty
textbook called "To Whom They Cast the First Stone." It's a
yeah,
phenomenal book about the transmission of specific stories that didn't find its home in certain gospels originally, like the adulterous woman story is one of the main ones it tackles. But I think that we have good textual evidence to show that John probably did write 1:1. But I don't have anything
sure.
further that I
But
would
there
be able to
that
verify.
brings, there's another question with John 1:1. Is it saying the word was God or the word was divine? And that's a big debate in scholarship,
It
obviously.
is.
Are
It
you
is.
familiar with
Yeah,
that,
it
Garrett?
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
so I mean, if it's saying the word was divine, that would, I would say, favor a non-Trinitarian view. But yeah.
But yeah,
That,
Not
that's
you're
my
right.
problem
necessarily.
with
You're
John.
right. If you go for that interpretation, I don't hold that interpretation. I think most of the manuscript evidence would probably consensus on the data that it does not say divine. But
Wait, but
I,
Yeah.
even if you say it's nature because of the tense of the word, I don't think that that matters. Because even when you go back, it personifies and it says, He who the word, all things were created through him. So it
wisdom, I
already
agree with you.
lets
I agree with you.
you see, yeah. So even at the end, it's saying the word is divine, as in the word is God, as in by predication. That's not going to do anything at all because it's letting you know that by nature, the very nature of this word is God. So I don't
Mhm.
see where the mix up there would
Well,
be.
you could also have issues with that one on whether it's discussing through or by. There's a fairly large distinction on that side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and then
also
with him,
Are
oh,
y'all
go on. I'm sorry.
specifically talking about John though?
John
we
1:1.
are
Yeah,
we
John
Yeah.
are
1:1.
Okay.
talking about
So
John,
under
correct?
Yes.
so first of all, in and I don't know anybody who's been in the room with me or not. I don't know. I'm a
Just
32
me.
year. Okay, you have okay. I'm a 32-year biblical scholar. So I've studied the Bible for 32 years. I am now an atheist, so just so that you know. But I do have a deep understanding of this as far as John is concerned. Why John thinks that the word itself is divine is because he thinks differently than Matthew and Mark. Because Matthew and Mark kind of lead to the idea, and I'm going to use Jesus as their reasoning for this, and it is kind of their reasoning, is that in Matthew and Mark, Jesus is seen as a being who became divine. And John is the divine coming down and being physical, and that's more so in John than any of the other texts. And so the problem then becomes is that's how he sees the word too. He sees the word as not originating from a person and becoming divine, but that the word is given divine as it comes down to the human who then puts it on the paper. So it's the same, he utilizes the same ideology in the descriptors of Jesus as he's utilizing for the descriptors of the words about Jesus, because that's how he sees that's how John sees everything differently than Matthew and Mark would have seen it.
I really appreciate that, Mono. I do think that John does see and interpret Jesus differently than the synoptics do, regardless of what authorship you apply to them.
I
Um,
mean, I
so
don't necessarily buy that, Matthew, Mark, and John even wrote Matthew, Mark, and John, but I do know that that author saw that in a different way than the authors
yeah,
in.
yeah, I agree with you actually, 100%. You actually came in a great spot. We were all talking about textual criticism, authorship, and a couple other
Right.
things right now. You came in at a great time. Um, don't mean to be that guy to bow out as soon as something interesting gets going, but I'm at work. I got some work calls coming in. I'm gonna go ahead and drop off the panel, but I really just appreciate the host and everybody on the panel for having me on and let me talk today.
Come back
God bless you,
anytime.
Garrett.
Nice to see you
God,
again, Derek.
yeah, good. God bless you guys, and hopefully, if I see y'all still on, and by the way, to my non-believers, I hope y'all have just a fantastic day, regardless of God being involved. but but listen, I want to come back and enjoy a more rigorous conversation when I have a little more time. Y'all have a great day.
Oh
You're
God.
going to work, so we'll pray for you.
I
Love it,
mean,
love it.
it's been a while
From
since
an
I.
atheist, I don't know much value that has, but hey.
Oh God. I'm an
So
agnostic,
can
by
I?
the way.
So Monad, can I ask you
Yeah.
a question? So
Sure.
when you okay, so do you think that what okay, wait. So do you think that John feels that Jesus is words like syllables? Or what do you mean by that when you said that?
Well, when he's describing a being, this is how the author's feeling would most likely have been, is that when he's describing a being where the divinity of the being existed before the being came into being, right? As Jesus, right? He's also ascribing that same ideology to the divinity of the words were already divine before the words were given to the man to write them down. See, because he believes that divinity comes from top to bottom, whereas other like Mark believes that divinity starts with a being and then comes from the bottom from well not really like we're not talking bottom up because then you might think I'm referring to like hell or something, but like comes from the being after they come into being. And that's the difference between John and Mark. And so his descriptors of the word that he's talking there is an assumption that everything in that word is already divine before it's been imparted to the writer to write it.
So, okay, so what makes you think that he's speaking of like the word, like that, like syllables, like rhema word? What makes you
Mm,
think that as opposed to like the logos, which
it's
is
not
entirely different than what you're talking about?
sure
Well, and he
if
may
I
also,
can
but here's the
pop
thing,
one little thing in.
that
Hmm.
particular way of thinking
Yeah, go ahead,
applies in.
Matthew, when he's done.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay, good. I just by word, I typically don't hear word as in like the the sound being made by the mouth parts,
Right, right.
right?
Right,
What when I hear the word, I'm talking about. I usually reference it to the knowledge being expressed,
Yes, expressed.
right, right.
right? So
And
when Jesus is the word, he is the person who is giving the knowledge.
Or
yeah.
he is the knowledge itself. And that's the way that I
Sure,
take it. And
sure.
that's why it's interesting to me, like when
See,
people, and oneness Christians do that too. So that's why I was like interested. Like, why are you
yeah,
saying, where
and
do
that's
you get that
exactly how
from?
John believed it is that Jesus was divine before he came down. So because he was divine, he is divinity itself. And
Hmm.
because he is the speaker of the teachings, the things that he's teaching, the things that he's imparting are divinity itself.
Yeah,
That's how John sees it. Now that's not necessarily how Matthew and Mark see it in the same way, but they do come to the same end conclusion, so it's okay because the end conclusion is still that he is divine, even though
So
the
why
way
did
that the
he use the word? Okay, because, okay, no, hold on. We're going to have to like think really here. And okay, so let's just say that John is a random person. His name is not really John, but he
right,
is a disciple and, or he knows the people, he's in the fold, let's say, but we don't know his name. Fine.
he's likely a follower of the Joanists movement,
Yes.
apostolic movement, somewhere in Ephesus.
Yes, let's
At
say
that
that, right? So
right,
he's learned from them and that sort of
right,
thing. Okay.
he has been
All right, so
passed
fine.
down the verbal and the
The
traditions.
lineage and
stories
the
and the
yeah.
tradition. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's who John is. But okay, now he's also very intelligent, obviously, just by the words he's using. So my question would be, right, based on all the data, all the information he has, he knows that the Greeks in particular are looking for the logos. They're also looking for the arche. These are two things that they are looking for.
Mhm.
Obviously, though, they don't think that this is a person or God per se, but more of a energy or a force or I don't know. And so this is what they're looking for. So
The
when
concept.
a concept, thank you, yes. So when John specifically uses that word logos,
Mhm.
why? I mean, there has to be a reason why he was like, this is the logos made flesh.
Sure. This goes back to kind of what I was talking about, where it's not so much like the auditory word or the written word being put down. That's not what I mean by the
It's the
word.
knowledge.
This would be the same as me like picking up a book and saying, this is a story, right? The book itself is not a story. It's bound papers with symbols written on it, but these symbols represent information. The symbols represent the story. So this book is a story, but it's not a story. Just like Jesus is the word, but he is not a word. He is not a spoken word, a written word. He is not knowledge, but he does contain all the knowledge required and would be called the word by anybody like discussing him. But that would be the concept held,
Hmm.
just the same as a reel of film isn't a movie, but we call it a movie, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I see the use of the word when discussing Jesus.
Yeah,
So
because
I'm the
in
same
math.
way. I'm
Oh,
the
go on.
same
I'm
way in
sorry.
that belief system, in that it's not just the words. It's the reasoning being imparted. If you look at the traditional philosophical and even ancient Greek philosophical reasoning for what the word logos means, it means that it means that there is a inherent reasoning or understanding that rules the physical the world rules the
Yes,
physical
amen.
world, right?
Yeah,
And so he's basically giving it, he's basically saying that it already had an inherent divine nature before Jesus even came down, thereby that is the logos. But he's also saying that the word spoken is the inherent reasoning that you need to take in to know that that is the logos, right? You have to take his words and understand them, because that is the understanding that rules the earth, but it's also the understanding that will help you be in alignment
right.
with the logos.
With truth. Yeah, no,
So
no, I completely agree with that. But do you think then that the word is okay? So then in the word of person, right? Because we would agree that the reality is like rational in some way. So based on what you just said about the logos, if the logos is the objective rationality that created all physical matter that now has come into the earth, why did you become atheist? I guess what would make you, if you saw that connection, what would make you say, no, I don't agree with that anymore?
because I don't believe that the character that the character of Jesus was based on did any of the things that they claim, because first of all there's zero firsthand account, simply because Matthew, Mark, and John did not write Matthew, Mark, and John. And I see syncretization of other idioms from people who would have syncretized them because they were people who were capable of writing Koine Greek, which means they existed directly in the Greco-Roman Empire, not in a region like in the Jordanian Valley area, right? They were existing actually in the kingdom. And so what would their religion have been that they would have syncretized? They would have syncretized Hellenistic views, they would have syncretized pagan views. This is why the styles of writing that are written about Jesus, they also would have written in epic style, which was something that only the Greco-Romans did. And what does epic style do? It exaggerates. When you have a Caesar having an epic written about him after his death, they make stories like he went out to a field of soldiers that were attacking Rome, and with his one sword and all by himself, he slayed 1,000 men. Is that true? Absolutely not. Do we know that that is an epic style exaggeration? Absolutely. Do we know that the people who wrote this also were writing in epic style about Jesus? Absolutely. Does that mean that there's exaggerations in that story? Absolutely, because that's exactly what they do when they write in epic style. And so,
Okay,
but
okay, okay. But
so
can I
that
ask you a
so then
question?
so now we have no firsthand account. We have syncretism happening from other faiths. We have epic style writings of exaggeration. Do I believe that there was a person? Yes, there probably was a person. What was he? He probably was what Rava Aslan says in his book Zealot, where he was a person who was trying to kick out the Romans or do things to upset the Romans to get them out, and wanted to be a king because he was part of the messianic movement of Jewish messianic movement, which is literally being a king, not a god in human form, but an actual sitting king. And he got crucified for it. Did he rise again in 3 days? No, I don't think likely he did. We actually even know where the rising again in 3 days story comes from, because the previous messianic character right before Jesus was born was a guy named Simon of Perea, and he had told the Romans, because they believed in resurrection, that if they unalived him as a messianic fighter, he was a warrior. He fought. Simon of Perea did. If they
Hmm.
unalived him, that he would rise again in 3 days, because he wanted to psych them out, because he knew they believed, as part of their pagan ideology, believed in resurrection. Well, he didn't succeed. They unalived him in a semicircle of cliffs, and they let the bodies of all the soldiers be retrieved. But his body stayed in that circle of cliffs, and they guarded that circle of cliffs for 3 months until his body fully rotted away to prove that he wouldn't rise again in 3 days. And that
Okay, now
story,
listen. I know that story, but I do want to go back to the Logos, right? And I know that you and Matthew, and I want to ask you guys because I know that you guys are against my theory, Jesus being God and everything, but I do want to talk to you about this because you guys know about the Logos. So, would the Logos, would it be fair, right? I know it's debatable, but would it be fair for me, right? Because everybody always asks me about tag arguments and things like that. So what I was thinking of is truth itself being objective is proof for God. And then, and I know that you guys would have arguments against that, but okay, just
what?
hear me out. I know, just hear me out. Okay, hold on. Just hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay? Like, you're quite literally the first human being I've actually said this to. So just hear me
No,
out.
I'm listening.
I'm listening. We're listening. We're
Okay,
open-minded.
I don't generally run tag arguments, okay? Like I generally just talk to theists, so just hold on. So hold on. So all right, so truth being objective, right, is a claim or proof for God. I know that you guys are like what? Whatever. Okay. Now, specifically though, right, the Christian God, because the word was made flesh and the word being that logos, and as you just already said up top, like the pattern for rationality or the pattern for life. So if the matter, if the things created by God are made by the logos and inherently have this pattern, then the mind picking up on this pattern is where truth and intelligence really lie. And so would that objectivity be proof for God? Okay, there you go.
No, and here's why I think that's not the case. Because here's the thing: John was written in such a late time, in comparison to, Matthew and Mark and John were all titled by Irenaeus. We know that, but we also know that that the writings that were titled Matthew and Mark were around prior to, and there's some arguments that end up being bolstered upon or built upon in John only because there was already an idea floating around that there may be some nature of previous writings that that these ideas hadn't been addressed in. So what you notice is you'll have someone that will write, okay, this is a first-hand account, and then the first-hand account gets disproven, and then the second writing is, okay, well, it may not be a first-hand account, but we believe this and this and this, and so that dispels, even if it's not firsthand, that there's some reasoning there, and there's some reason for you to believe it. And then when that gets dispelled, you have John coming along and saying, well, the reason that we believe it is because it's coming down directly from God. It is the Logos, and so that becomes an inarguable thing. There's no way that you can disprove that. There's no way you can argue against it. And so you have these arguments that are being addressed as the time period goes along, and trying to make the argument more and more inarguable, which that proves that the reason it's being done is to bolster it, and it proves that the lies are inarguable. It wasn't true in the first place, because if they're having to fill gaps with inarguable arguments, then that's literally what they're trying to do. They're trying to bolster it. Does
Okay.
that show my point? Does that
I
get?
mean that shows your point. I would be interested in Matthew's point because because I feel like I would only hit this objection that you're bringing up if I am
And
debating
that happens
somebody.
with Paul's writings too, by the way. It happens with Paul's writings that Paul, Paul had three experiences where he supposedly saw Jesus, the road to Damascus being the first one, but he had two more. That there was arguments about the road to Damascus experience. Could have been that he just, fell off his horse and he saw the sun and, whatever. Well, when he had his second experience, he addressed the arguments that happened between his first and his second experience. He addressed them with his second experience. Then he had other
Mhm.
arguments about his second experience that he addressed with the third experience by bolstering it even further. So see, we see this process happening all throughout the religious writings of the New Testament, where they always seem to want to address previous arguments and bolster them, which means that the first argument probably wasn't even true. Because if you have to bolster it, if you feel you have to bolster it, then what that also means is that you're creating a fictitious story just to address criticism.
Right, but I think and I get what you're saying, but I think that is kind of like not to my point, right? Because now we would just be debating the Bible itself and whether or not it's true or not true. And obviously, I'm going to feel like it's true, but I think at the end of the day, if we're talking about truth being objective, it will be kind of going into the weeds. And I think the only objection, like, the only person that
you're falling into the inarguable point. That's exactly what we're saying, is he created that argument so that you would believe exactly what you believe.
wasn't Jesus Christ, then I mean, I would ask you, then what is it, right? Jesus has been said to be the Logos, so we don't have any real reason to believe that he's not.
By who? By who claimed that Jesus was the Logos, and when?
I mean, yeah, obviously that would be okay. So what you're saying, okay, so all right, let me ask you a question. Do you think that most people that I bring this argument to are just going to debate me on John and on the accuracy of John? Is that what's going to happen?
No, it's going to be on the accuracy of who was John talking to, because he wasn't talking. Well, let's go back. Let's start with who was Jesus talking to? Jesus wasn't talking to everybody. He was talking to the lost tribes of Israel. He wasn't talking to Gentiles. He wasn't talking to Greeks. He wasn't talking to Romans. He was talking to Jewish people who were the lost tribes of Israel. So, but here's the problem, is then when you get to John, John's no longer talking to the lost tribes of Israel, because this is post-Paul, right? So the text was written post-Paul. So at that point, the message had been going out to the Gentiles. And so this author of John, who wasn't John himself, likely, but it was a person that existed.
Saying. But I just don't think, if we're just dealing with the substance of the argument, not whether or not John was lying, right? But if we just, like, an internal critique, basically, if we were just going to at least accept that John was accurate in what he wrote, or at least felt he was being accurate, right? Like, he wasn't just lying to just make something up, but truly he did believe that the Logos was made flesh, then what would the argument be?
As I said,
and I'm just asking,
the reason he made the argument, the reason he made the argument is because it's an inarguable, it's an inarguable thing. I can't tell you that wasn't a true belief.
Wait, by the way, guys, I think you guys might have an echo. I'm hearing like an echo on Twitch and YouTube.
I am too. of my voice, so it's someone else, not me.
Yeah, wait, I didn't hear it until you just unmuted though. Mute now. Okay, wait, now talk, Monad.
It might be me.
I think it was Coco somehow, because it's only now Coco unmute.
Oh, it's you. It's you.
Oh wait, what?
Yeah,
Should
I was like, because I didn't hear an echo at first.
should I
Yeah.
restart the live?
No, because we don't hear an echo now.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the point, though. That's why he made that argument, because it's an inarguable point.
So you're saying it's a great point, but it's probably a lie. Can we settle on that?
Yes, no, I agree. It is a great point because it's a great way to make an inarguable point. You can't.
Yay!
Nobody can argue with it, right? It's like saying something that's just totally unprovable. Why? How are you going to prove that? How are you going to prove it's not true? Or you're not. No one can prove it either way. So the problem then becomes is then you have to go by what you have to do at that point is you have to go by why is he making an inarguable point? Why did he get to the point of having to feel like he made an inarguable point? When you go back and you look at other texts that he would have been exposed to and other arguments that were being made during the first century, the reason he's making this inarguable point is to address previous criticisms.
Okay, but why? Okay, now let me just grant to that. Let me just say, okay, John. This is how they will know truly who I am.
Another inarguable point, which is why he said what he said. It's like if I write a text and then 2,000 years from now, somebody reads it, and I say, this is absolutely true. There's no way to argue that this is true because this is based on this, this, and this, because this is such a metaphysical concept. It's so metaphysical and conceptual nature that it becomes inarguable. That's how come you've got to believe it's true. The problem is in 2,000 years, that's still going to be an inarguable point because it's still going to be a metaphysical concept that is not tangible one way or the other. And because it's not tangible one way or the other, it can't be proven or argued against either way. Besides that all you want, but the fact of the matter is it hasn't been and it won't be.
I don't know. I mean, and this is something that I haven't really delved into, but what if we looked at human behavior? So if we're looking at Christ as the logo, real rapidly. I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm thinking of.
I'd say
Here's the thing.
neither.
How long did we exist this earth without religion? Without any religion.
Pretty far back.
Homo sapiens sapiens, us, we are Homo sapiens. Process of evolution. Sapiens have existed 100,000 years. Religion, including early forms of animism, agriculturalistic religions, and other things have existed.
But remember, it wasn't. So we're going to stay with what the Bible says because I'm Christian right now, just to see if it matches up with reality. So right,
but logos. Logos is not a Christian concept.
Of course, right? Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. Why? How do we know that he didn't, like, the Holy Spirit? Because they've always been searching for this thing, this objective thing that they knew was there. And yes, you're right. Like, they didn't think it was Christian at all, or Jewish, or probably
it wasn't.
God.
It was Greek. This was a Greek theology. This was a Greek understanding that predated Jesus. That predated.
Right. But hold on. Just hold on. So yes, I understand, but that's because the Greeks were the philosophers. So even though they weren't Jewish, right? They weren't following Yahweh, but they were looking for the objective truth outside of themselves. They were looking for that. So they did have the word logos, which is just going to signify this objective truth or this objective pattern. That's all they're looking for. And then all of a sudden, John identifies that with Christ. And I see what you're saying. John could just be like, trust me, bro. But that's what I'm saying. Even if you look at the patterns that happen or came out of humanity, that generally all follow Christ. Even this concept of going to heaven, like, I mean.
Well, you understand that the first use of the word logos during the times of Heraclitus would not have. Heraclitus was the first person to use the word logos in roughly the 500s BC, right? Mm-hmm. So, but there was no divine nature to the word logos at that time.
Correct. But it was still objective. I didn't say divine. I said, so